Time for our panel this Monday afternoon on PM Agenda. A very good afternoon. Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris, good to see you both. I want to start with the by-election, the date finalised or confirmed today. December 5 in North Sydney. After Joe Hockey's retirement, voters in North Sydney will be electing his replacement. So just 3 weeks out from Christmas, they'll be at the polls. I guess the question right now is, will Labor actually stand a candidate? Bruce, your thoughts in a moment. Grahame, what's your free advice, having been involved in a lot of by-elections? Should Labor actually run?
Look, if they've got $500,000 to spend, if they are sure, for Mr Shorten's sake, they can get more than the average swing of 5%, then Labor, go for your life. Tough ask, though.
In other words, probably not.
Well, yeah. Look, it would keep the Libs honest, and you'd have a fair income election. But you know, more often than not nowadays, parties are choosing not to run if they don't think they can actually win.
Yeah, and Bruce, the money's important, isn't it? Because you've got a general election due sometime in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Is it worth spending whatever it costs on North Sydney, or saving it up for the general election? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I've just been told by Sussex Street that it's highly unlikely that Labor will be running a candidate in North Sydney, so that's the answer, I think, to the first question.
Right.
The second is, yes, it's a very expensive exercise. It would be rather quixotic on Labor's part, I think. It would be tilting in a windmill. I don't see them spending that money. It's getting harder and harder to come by campaign funding rather than the other way around these days. So I don't think they're going to be doing it. And, of course, there's just been a redistribution. So now they're focusing on the pre-selections and really I don't think they're going to be in that space at all.
Yeah, I saw Scott Morrison on radio this morning saying Labor's vacating the field if they don't run in North Sydney. Grahame, is that a bit unfair? Is that just a bit of a political dig?
Well, look, the major parties are choosing now when they run it in. And you know, we've just had a by-election in Western Australia, and that was before the change of leader, and there was only a 4-5% swing, which is just average. Yeah. So for Mr Shorten to have anything to talk about at all, he's got to get more than 5%.
Yep.
Big ask.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, Bruce, what do you think this by-election is going to be about? Is it going to be that important? Is it just going to be a fairly run-of-the-mill, pretty uneventful contest, given there's just recently been a leadership change we're really yet to see much in the way of policy detail from Turnbull? How important will this actually be?
Well, of course, if Labor doesn't run a candidate, and it seems now they won't, then it becomes very difficult to gauge anything from it at all. I guess there will be independent candidates there. It's been held by an independent in the past, Ted Mack, for a long time. So it's a seat which has gone that way in the past, but I don't think that there's any suggestion that this would be anything other than a very safe Liberal seat, particularly given the way in which Malcolm Turnbull is positioning himself right now. I think he really fits very much into the North Sydney mould, and I would expect that there would be a very comfortable win by Trent Zimmerman if he does become the candidate for the Liberal Party. He's the long-term operative inside the Liberal Party, been working those numbers for a long time, the president of the Liberal Party right now.
There's apparently, Grahame, been a bit of disquiet about this. He's the acting New South Wales Party president as well. He sets the rules, or sits on the body that sets the rules for these by-elections, and apparently there wasn't a lot of time for anyone to put up their hand as a candidate. There's going to be a few out the front protesting tonight when they do the pre-selection.
Look, the minute North Sydney was called, Trent was always going to run. And I presume he'll win tonight. Another candidate there, John Harder, would be a fantastic local member of Parliament. But yeah, look, if Trent wins, I think he should resign straight away.
As party president?
Well, yeah. You cannot have him sitting with one hat saying, how much are we going to spend on me? What are the rules? Who's going to say this stuff about me? And the poor old campaign director, he'd have the candidate and the president as the same person.
Yeah.
No, that'd be just silly.
Yeah, I think so. All right. A couple of other things. Superannuation. Grahame, the government's now talking about tackling the gender inequality when it comes to super balances. I mean, it's been there for a long time. It's pretty stark, the difference between men and women on retirement, what they've got in their super. We know the reasons why, but what do you think about the best way to tackle this?
Well, look, the idea is terrific. And there used to be, I don't know if it's still around, but there used to be, and this is hard if you haven't got much money, but in the sort of struggle stream, if somebody said, look, I've got $2,000 and I'll put it towards, mum at home's super. The government said, OK, we'll match it. Now that's fine, but who in Struggle Street's got $2,000 to do that? But if you could, I think that is a nice idea. I'm not quite sure how else you do it.
It's going to benefit the wealthier, though, who can throw 2, 3, 5, 10 into super.
But it's means testers.
Yeah.
So the wealthy don't get it.
Yeah.
But yes, I suppose if you've got $2,000 to play with, then you're fairly wealthy.
Bruce, more broadly on superannuation, Labor's been in this space for a while with its policy idea on taxing the wealthier retirees. How do you see this issue shaping up? Because clearly Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison are preparing the ground for something here.
Look, I think it's going to be more difficult for Labor, of course, when the government comes in and starts replicating their policies, essentially. And if they go down that path, then that'll be good news for low-income earners, because, frankly, there has been too much given to the very wealthy superannuants who can afford to pay some tax if they're earning, in excess of $75,000, $100,000 a year out of superannuation. So I think Labor's on the money there. They can keep pointing to the fact that they've been running this line, for years now in one way or another. Their actual policy, I think, was introduced in April of this year when it was being poo-pooed by Abbott and Hockey. So they can say, well, we've been consistent on this issue throughout. But it gets us back to this whole question that I think Labor's really grappling with now is, what do you do when you get a leader who decides to move their party into the centre ground and stamp their flag there? This is exactly what successful Labor leaders have done in the past, whether it be Hawke and Keating or Bob Carr or Mike Rann or any of the others, and Tony Blair in the UK, for example, 3 terms, all taking their party, the Labor Party, into the centre. We've never seen this with the Liberal Party before in such an obvious way, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it plays out. It could actually...
Well, it's a good point. It makes it hard for an opposition. Let me ask you, because Malcolm Turnbull did a bunch of newspaper interviews over the weekend, and one of the things he said is he's calling for an end to scare campaigns. Now, the three of us have spoken a lot about campaigning, fear versus hope. Bruce, will we ever see the end of scare campaigns?
If you talk about someone like Godwin Gretsch, I suspect that Malcolm Turnbull's actually got a bit of answering to do for himself there. So I don't think he should be too holy about these things. But look, the answer is no. I don't think we're ever going to see an end to scare campaigns, and probably we're going to see more of it as he moves more and more into the centre ground. Perhaps some of the scare campaigning will be coming from his own party, but this sort of politics actually represents a long-term existential threat for the Labor Party. It really does.
I thought out of all the interviews, the PM did, something came through, and that was in the articles, the editors, the journalist and himself. Everyone's relaxed and comfortable about federal politics. Look, a long time ago we used to have ads in the mid-80s from Whinging Wendy. If Mr Shorten's not careful, you could cop Bleating Bill.
All right, we'll see where things stand next week. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much for that. Quick break and then we'll be back with